show and tell. All right, so this is what we're going to look at tonight. Birth of a ham radio station from Boyd, KO4GJO. Building a word clock from Mark, KR3AM. Reconditioning a Millen VFO from 1941 QST from Wilson. Is Wilson on Zoom? Not yet, okay. A POTA portable antenna from Roger. Roger is on Zoom. And then last but not least, Randy's going to talk to us a little bit about streaming and YouTube. And it seemed like the people came forward a little slowly. We had 2 to start with. So I keep sending emails and shaking the trees. And then all of a sudden we've got 7. So I asked 2 people if they wouldn't mind waiting until the next show and tell. So we're already getting this teed up for the next time. So hopefully this will be something that'll be very popular and we'll be able to go through it. Could we have done 7? Probably not. Because what we don't want to do is to say, okay, you've got 7.63 minutes, get done, then you're out off the desk. And we don't have a hook to pull people off. And, we didn't want to use clock. Oh, okay. Now, interesting point. The first person that's doing the presentation volunteered the hook so I can pull him off the stage. With that, Boyd, it's yours. Come on up.
I didn't say I was giving you the hook.
Here you go, sir.
Thank you. I'm Boyd Hudson. For those of you who don't know, I've been a ham for a little over a year now. Was involved with CB radio back in the 60s when you had to have a license for that. When I decided to get back into radio, ham was just more interesting to me. The past couple of years have been interesting to say the least. Started putting a ham station together in the middle of going out on medical disability and retirement and having my wife retire, which is like having your supervisor living at home. And so there have been a number of interesting twists and turns. Can we start off with the first slide? This is my house, and this is an example of the first rule of photography. Take lots of pictures. You're bound to get a pretty one by accident, if nothing else. And when you do, enlarge it, frame it, hang it up in your house. Visitors will say, oh, did you take that picture? That looks really pretty. And they'll think you know what you're doing with photography. All the rest of them, keep them in the shoebox under your bed and don't show them to anybody. But now with digital photography, you can actually afford to do that. So the lot is a sloped lot. We've got 2 stories on the front, 3 stories on the back. It has a full basement with a walkout door in the back. The room on the left on the first floor, that's the window you see behind me on Zoom meetings. I wanted to just get one of those window panels and run coax out the front window and go up the tree that was right in front of the house there. My wife said, absolutely not. My son, the mechanical engineer, said, no coax entry on the front of the house, period. It'll look like crap. He will be referred to as engineering department from here on out. And anything has to go through engineering and the chief financial officer, who isn't me. Next slide. I went down to the basement and was sitting there trying to think of where I could run the coax. And I glanced up and went, duh. I had the builder put a 4-inch PVC pipe on each end of the house so I could hook it up and use it as an exhaust fan outlet if I was painting or doing anything smelly in the basement. Well, the oil burner blower I was using to do that with finally gave out after having it in use for 30 some years, and my dad had gotten it used before that, so no telling how old that was, but it quit working a couple years ago. Now I know what to do with this hole. Put all my coax through it. Next. This box is called an entry panel. They're a lot easier to find online if you know what the name of it actually is. I found this one by accident and bought it, and after that saw it was called an entry panel and got online and found a whole bunch more. So That's the one I got for right now. That snowball's another story. Next slide. There are numerous things that can delay a ham station. Planned projects, such as a built-in standby generator, is one of them. That was already scheduled, had to wait and get that bought and paid for and installed. Then we could see about doing the rest of the stuff. But then there are unplanned things that come up. Next slide. Some bubbling paint around the wood on the front porch led to the discovery that that wood is rotten and we need to take a closer look. Next slide. That led to this. The fascia board was all rotten. Some of the 2x6 supports going up in the roof was rotten. So all that had to be replaced, and put a new gutter up on the front porch, and found out that the reason that the water got in there was because the shingles were failing. Yes, I got 30 years out of my 20-year shingles. Next slide. I had to replace the shingles on the roof too. When I went up in the attic and checked down along the eaves, you could see a couple spots where there were water stains on the plywood roof decking. So off with the old shingles, replace a couple areas that needed replacing, and all new shingles all over and new gutters all the way around. So we had to wait for that and get through that. Next slide. You can see the tall antenna tower in the middle. Looks awful lot like a tree, blends in real nice. The homeowners association doesn't really have any problems with that. It was left there by the previous landowner, and I'm very grateful to him for that. Next slide. On the way out for the October ham meeting, I walked out the front door and I saw a spot of blue sky where there hadn't been any previously. And this is right after Ian came through. Well, this was one of my alternate antenna towers that I was going to hook the end of my dipole to. Well, all the king's horses, all the king's men couldn't straighten that sucker out. So we had to get that cut down, removed, and hauled away. So that was one more thing. Sounds like an episode of Columbo. Just one more thing. Next slide. There's the snowball again. He's sitting in the end of the pipe to keep the bugs out and the mice or whatever. I got it fitted with a copper plate, lightning arresters, and a ground wire going down to the ground rod that's right underneath the box. Those ropes draped over the box are the pull cords that are going through the conduit, which go out to the antenna tower. Next slide. There's said conduit. Right before the elbow, I drilled 3 holes in it, and that'll let out any water that gets in the conduit. It's a downhill run from the tower to the box, so that ought to take care of that. Remember that elbow, you will see it again. There's going to be a quiz later. Next slide. Here's the conduit. I put it between the house and the generator. Could only go down as far as the sewer pipe that was coming from the house to the septic tank. Decided I didn't want to dig down below that, so we just left it on the shallow side there. The closer I get to the tree, if you keep the conduit sort of level, the deeper it gets in the ground because it's the slope lot, so it worked out. Next slide. There's the other end of the conduit as it's getting deeper, and I'm getting more tired of digging.
How did you do that?
I just used a lot of it is Orange County red clay. So I actually used a thing called a garden claw, which is a blue thing with 4 prongs, and you push it in the dirt and twist it, and it breaks up the clay. And then I could use a trenching shovel, which was a narrow shovel, and actually get the loose dirt out. So that worked out very well. Next slide. Here's the other end. Went from having hard Carolina clay to hard Carolina clay with tree roots in it. Lots of them and big ones. So we brought it up to the surface and ran it along the surface. And when I blow the leaves back, it covers it up nicely and you don't see a thing. If you look, you might find some Gatorade bottles, one here, there's another one there, and there's another ground rod right up at the base of that other tree. But they're ground rods every so often, and they're all bonded together and attached to the service ground on the way past the generator. Next slide. Here we are at the other end. The top of the weather head is just sitting on top of the ground rod, and I've got all the cords coming out ready for pulling the coax through when I could afford to get the coax. That was the biggest thing, is waiting to get the coax I could afford to get. Next slide. Everything happens for a reason. Sometimes the reason is you're stupid and you make bad decisions. A learned member of this august body suggested to me to use silicone spray on the coax when I was pulling it through the line. Well, by the time I got everything in place, I realized I was up there and I forgot the silicone spray, and my knees were hurting real bad, and I didn't want to walk downhill to the basement to get that spray can. I should have. Next slide. Here's that elbow. And if you look right here on that fat piece of coax, which is the one I did not want to damage, there's a friction burn from the rope we used to pull the last piece of coax through. The jacket was damaged, but thankfully not the braid. So that was good. That is a piece of Messi and Poloni Hyperflex 13. It's soft, it's pliable, it's easy to work with. It ain't cheap. So I sent an email to Messi and Poloni asking them what kind of silicone they would recommend to repair that with. Figure maybe one tube of goop is better than another. Next slide. They told me to look at the video for their silicone seal. This is a picture of it. It's not a tube. It's actually a coiled up plastic tube, and it has a silicone sleeve on it. And what you do is you pull the center part out and it uncoils from the inside. And as it does, that sleeve collapses on top of the coax. Doesn't need any time to cure. You don't get any goop on your hands or anything else. And it works very, very well. So you would just do this, and there's plenty of room to pass connectors. And when you pull it, it all would collapse down on it. So that's all it takes, is to put in a silicone seal over connectors. The small size is a short connector or a short piece of tubing meant for putting on one connector. The large is a longer piece of tubing meant to cover two connectors screwed together. I thought the video was so cool. When my son came over, I tried to show it to him, and he's like, Dad, I'm familiar with that product. The antenna guys at work use it all the time. I'm like, all right, well, so much for me showing you cool stuff anymore. You're just way past me at this point. Next slide. There we are back with the coax run. Got wire ties holding the pipe up. I ended up clipping the tails off of that. Next slide. Here I've got the everything connected to the lightning arresters. Still have to run a ground wire from that plate to the inside. And there's one piece of RJ6 that doesn't have a connector on it. I was going to use that to put up an FM antenna, so I'd at least get good FM reception for a stereo in the basement whenever I had music playing. I figured since I was going to be putting stuff up in trees, I might as well do a regular FM antenna. Next slide. Here's the fine print from the homeowners association. Basically, any satellite dishes or antennas for transmit or receive have to be screened from the roads in such a manner as to satisfy the committee. If you don't have an active homeowners association, there's no committee to satisfy. Next slide. This is in the backyard. I wanted to see how far my air cannon would shoot. And if you look, this yellow and orange line goes way up here to that dark spot right there. That's higher than my house. I think we got things covered. I decided to shorten that air gun a little bit and ran into some problems. So I've got to work out some internal dimensions to get it back where it's working again. But I think that'll do just fine for what I want. Next slide. This is a schematic for a homebrew Gain Master antenna, which I guess is more popular in the UK. It's intended for use with CB, but can be modified to use with 10 meters. So that's what I wanted to use as a 10-meter antenna for right now. Next slide. There it is stretched out. I tried to use PVC pipe to support it and mount it on a staff, but it was like holding a wet spaghetti noodle. PVC is just not strong enough for that. So I ended up getting rid of that. But around where that coil is, I glued 2 pieces of PVC together around that. And I'm not going to try to separate it because I'll ruin something doing that. So what I'm going to do is tie some polyester UV resistant antenna guy rope to it and support it with that, and just use a little prusik knot that I can adjust up and down to keep the top part stretched out. And on the bottom, I'm going to have some more of that rope tied to the coax that's feeding it. So all of that all the weight of the coax and the weight of the antenna will actually be supported by the rope and not putting any load on the wiring. That little curved piece is a matching stub that's on there. I'm probably gonna get a little piece of fiberglass from a driveway marker and zip tie it to that so it'll stay straight and won't look quite so ridiculous. Next slide. That's a picture of the dual band, well, actually tri-band UHF VHF 6-meter antenna that I was going to put up. I took a picture of it near the SO sign for Wilson's benefit. He used to work for SO. My dad did as well. So next slide. There's a stock photo of the antenna that I put up. Next slide. There's the antenna after I installed it. You can't find antenna masts for TV antennas anymore for some strange reason. But you can find 10-foot lengths of chain link fence top rail, which works very well for an antenna mast. That and some cans of camouflage spray paint. And if you'll notice on this tree, there are 3 places here where you have black paracord lashing the mast to the tree. The mast goes up, and somewhere in here, if you were to enlarge it, is the base of the antenna, and you can see the ground plane elements, and the white part goes up to somewhere around in here. But nice and very well screened. Next slide. Yeah, arrested development is what I titled this one. Polyphaser antenna lightning arresters are currently $85 to $95 each, depending where you look. Alpha deltas are around $65 each. This style I've seen under brand names of Comet, MFJ, and a couple others I can't remember offhand. These Nagoya ones were $16.95 each. So I got the last three I needed were those. Next slide. Here we are out at the base of the antenna tower. I've got a ground rod in with the copper plate attached to it, and then the lightning arresters attached to it. This is the one that's hooked up for the VHF, UHF, and the 6 meter. And then I've got 3 other pieces of coax I can use. And then there's a piece of RJ6 in there for the FM antenna I'm going to put up. But that way I've got what I need to expand to for HF, and plenty of room to grow. Next slide. And that's my temporary weather cover over the top of it. Let's see here. So the what's the next slide? 34, 35. All right, here we are down in the basement. I just used the available table I had and half of a wire shelf unit to put radios on. I've got a little power supply here, VHF, UHF, 10 meter and 6 meter mobile rigs. When I do get an HF after I get my general license upgrade, if the HF unit I have has 10 meters on it, then I can take that 10 meter and put it in the car. And I was out shopping the other day. Next slide. And I got inspired. There are no less than 7 antennas on that car. If I do that, my wife will kill me for sure. Anyway, here ends the reading.
Very much. Anybody got any questions for Blake? Well done. Very good.
I've heard it said that the most important aspect of your ham station is the coax.
Absolutely.
So I took that to heart.
You're not going to get any power from the transmitter to the antenna unless you have a piece of coax in the middle. Okay, very good. Thank you again, Boyd. Okay, next presentation will be Mark. Come on down.
So Heisenberg was driving down the road and a cop pulls him over. And the cop says, "Do you know how fast you were going?" And he says, "No, but I knew where I was." All right. So you'll get it eventually. Okay. So I have a friend who lives in California. We used to be business partners. We've exchanged Christmas presents for years and years. Usually it's been books, but for various reasons, he has trouble reading these days. So I thought a couple of years ago, I thought, God, I need to come with something more interesting, something interesting for him that's not a book. So I decided to make him a word clock, and you'll see what that is in a second. And I decided to do this in early November, and the project ended up being rather large and entailed buying a milling machine and learning how to operate that. But as I say, no project is worth doing unless it entails buying an expensive power machine tool. So that was all good. So his birthday is in late March. So I did get it to him in time for his birthday, and he was happy with that. So I have a video. It turned out I submitted this to Hackaday, and it was actually featured as an article in Hackaday about it. And there's a video in the article. So Lori's going to. I think when Lori is playing the audio, it'll play the video. The audio should come out through the speaker. Yeah. We'll see. All right. Here we go. Hopefully. Oh, you gotta watch the commercial first. Yeah, of course, yeah. I hope this works. Yeah. If not, I'll narrate it myself.
I've built 3 of these so far, 2 for friends, and this one for me and Beth. So like all word displays the current time in 5-minute increments. Most clocks have a 10 by 10 grid of letters, but I chose to build mine with a 12 by 12 grid because that gave me the chance to add some additional features. You can see down here, it shows you the day of the week. Today is Friday. And then here, it shows you how many minutes have elapsed since the time that's currently displayed. So here it says it's 4 o'clock plus 4, so it's actually 4:04 right now. The extra letters also allow me to say happy birthday to my friends and their spouses. So on each person's birthday, during the day, at the top of each hour, the clock displays a happy birthday message. I can show you what that looks like right here. There we go. The clock is wishing happy birthday to me and Beth. Buzz is the nickname that a friend of hers gave her many years ago. And she likes to call me Captain because, of course, I like to sail. Go back to the clock mode. You can also see that the clock is backlit. During the day, there's kind of a nice sky blue. And then the horizon has a nice, pretty ocean color. And the clock shows you where the sun is as the day progresses. So in the morning, the clock simulates a sunrise. And the sun goes around the clock, and then in the evening, it simulates a sunset. So I can show you what that looks like in what's called fast clock demo mode. So here we go. So it's evening, or it's morning just before sunrise. And the clock is slowly, there you can see the sun is slowly rising here in the east. And once it's fully risen, the clock will start incrementing in by the hour. So here it's moving through the hours. And then when it gets to the evening, it slows down again and simulates sunset in the west. So there's the sun setting in the west.
Yeah, so I think what I was explaining is that, so the sun rises in the east and then sets in the west. So for that to happen, the clock has to know where east is, right? So it has a compass built into it. And it also has an accelerometer. That's the way it knows which way down is. So that way it can orient the compass, and then as it rotates, it knows which direction, east, north, and south, west. So anyway, that's how it knows where to have the sun rise. So if it were on the opposite wall, the sun would rise on the other side. There's also a little light sensor right here behind a hole, so that the clock can reduce it'll reduce the brightness of the letters as the room gets darker. Right. So that's basically it. So this is, people have done there. If you go on YouTube or on the internet, you'll find gazillions of word clocks. But this is, so my own personal take on a word clock. And as I said, the nice thing is that each word clock is customized, so it can wish happy birthday to it's either my friend and his wife, or to me and Beth in our case. So I've built a total of 6 of these now. This one is hanging in our kitchen, and I have 5 friends around the country who have clocks. My wife's sister wants one. So I got to get going and build her a word clock. There's the way I should have a picture behind it, but there's a Raspberry Pi that controls everything. As I say, the accelerator, the compass, and the light sensor. And then the LEDs are these really neat LED strips that are individually controllable. So you can change the color for each individual LED. So I designed it very carefully so that the letters, the spacing of the letters was the same as the pitch of the LEDs on these strips. So I used the milling machine to mill a piece of MDF that's behind the face of the clock, and the LED strips fit into notches in that piece of MDF. And then the face sits on top of the MDF. Probably the most challenging thing to get right was the face. And originally I thought I could just, there are companies that will print signs for you, and you can get a sign printed on a piece of translucent acrylic. And so I did my daughter actually did the design for me because she's really good with design tools like Acrobat. And so we did the design, and we designed it so that they would print the black ink on the face and then leave the letters clear so that the lights would shine through the translucent acrylic. So I had this done, and I got the piece of acrylic back, and the black was not opaque enough. So the LEDs would actually shine through the black paint, and so it ruined the effect. So you'd have this kind of glow around each letter. So I thought, oh shoot, what am I going to do? So next thing, I found another company that was willing to do 2 passes of the paint. So I bought a piece of an acrylic sign from this company, 2 passes of the ink, still not opaque enough. So my next idea, I thought, okay, well, I'll take 2 pieces of acrylic and sandwich them, and I'll print the image in reverse on one of them, so that the paint basically the painted sides butt against each other, right? And I figured, okay, that will be opaque enough, right? So I had Science.com do one of those, and it turned out that they aren't very good at registration from pass to pass, and it's impossible to get two pieces of acrylic printed that will perfectly align. And of course, it won't work unless the letters perfectly align. So finally, I found a company in San Diego, and they do what's called, they do a piece of acrylic with a piece of vinyl glued onto the face. And they do what's called kiss cutting, where they have some tool, I'm not sure how it works, but it actually cuts out the letters. And then someone at their shop carefully takes a piece of tweezers and pulls the vinyl out for each letter, leaving this really nice opaque vinyl and a really crisp letters. And so that worked out really well. And so I was very pleased with that. It's very expensive, but it was the only solution I could find. So that's how I did that. Just one final thing. My niece, Ellen, wanted a clock. And she said, well, can you also wish happy birthday to my 2 children? And so her name's Ellen. Her first child is named Elia. The second child is August. And her husband's name is Alejandro. So there's limited real estate on the clock, right? So you basically, you've got happy at the top, and then birthday, and then all the names have to fit down here, right? Along with all the words that spell out the time, right? So this is a real interesting challenge, and I puzzled over this for a long time, but I finally, she said, you can abbreviate Alejandro's name to Ali, A-L-E, and you can abbreviate August to Augie, and my name can be L. So it was L, Augie, Elia, and Ali. And I had a brainstorm. I realized I could do Ali vertically. And once I did that, all the names fit in on the face of the clock. So it will now wish happy birthday to all 4 members of their family. She's talking about having a 3rd child. And And I told her, okay, you can have a child, but you have to name it either Mitt or Eve. Because it happens that those two words are on the clock. So all I have to do is modify the software and we can wish happy birthday to Mitt. All right. So, all right, that's the word clock. Yeah. I'd say what? Yes. Well, I mean, if you wanted to, right. Yeah, there's a boundary area where, it's has to toss a coin basically. I mean, there's some point where it's either on the left or the right, and so yeah, it'll be one or the other, right? Yeah, right. No, it doesn't get stuck. It'll pick one or the other. But there's also there's a website. That was in the video. You can control it from your phone. Did a little web page that the thing runs a website, the Raspberry Pi, and you can actually choose which side to have the sunrise on. So if you're not happy with its choice, you can override the compass and just have it set yourself. Yeah, yeah.
I just like to say it's hard for the video to show how elegant it looks when you see it in person.
Oh, thank you, Dan. Thanks so much. Yeah, yeah. There were a lot of challenges in figuring out how to fabricate it, how to attach the acrylic to the MDF backing and so forth and so on. But it took a lot of iterations. But yeah, it finally kind of fell into place. Yeah. Thanks. All right.
The next presentation will be from Wilson about the reconditioning of a Millen VFO. It's a new VFO made in 1941, at least this one was based on the article. And you can get an idea from this slide. Wilson kind of likes older radio things, and all of that stuff works, okay? And he makes sure he keeps it running. So with that, let me turn this over to Wilson, and he can take it away with his Millen VFO. Over to you, Wilson.
Okay, I hope things run smoothly here. I've had a little trouble with DN, but it's okay right now. Yes, it all does work. Not only does it works very well. And part of it just talked to Crozet Island, so its functionality is up to date, if not its design. Let's see. Millen, James Millen, I'll tell you more about him later on. Yeah, let's move on. So here's the front of the little unit, and I had grandiose plans for being able to show it to you live tonight along with some demo, but that didn't work out. So this was a QST article from 1941, just before the war. It's not, some of you are old enough to remember when money was not plentiful. Even people who were fairly well off didn't think money was plentiful. So you didn't find teenagers buying $800 radios. They were scrounging parts from old TV sets and junk and things like that. Not that they all did, but that was really common. And ever since the old days, people have been talking about things being expensive because components were always expensive, at least when they were made in the US. So Henry Rice made a design using the techniques of AC/DC, and that means radios that would run on either AC or DC, basically radios that didn't have power transformers, which made them very cheap. So if your your grandmother had a table model radio, it was probably an AA5, meaning All American 5. There were hundreds of designs using 5 tubes. Mostly they were very much alike, but everybody tried to do designs. So I'd encourage you to go to antiqueradios.org and find hundreds and hundreds of radio cases, Art Deco and other materials, designs with wood and plastic, some of which are design-wise really pretty hot, and some are actually expensive. So the problem with this is without a transformer, the ground, the negative side of your power supply is connected to the AC line. So what they did was either insulate the knobs, insulate the radio with the knobs, or float the whole circuit with a couple bypass capacitors to the chassis, which really didn't do much. But the problem was if one of those capacitors went bad and your plug happened to be plugged in the right way in the wall, remember these are 2-wire cords, you could find your chassis at 120 volts. So when you see in the movies people committing murder with radios, this is the background of how they did it. So part of this not having the filament power transformer is that instead of the 6-volt tubes some of us are familiar with, they had to make tubes with high voltage filaments so they could be run directly from the line. So the All American 5 had some 12 and 24 volt, even 50 volt tubes. And when they put the filaments in series, they could run directly off the line. And that's how they got by without the filament transformer. Next picture. Oh, well, wait a minute. You can see the dial, the numbers, the calibrations there. And on the left, you see a little thing sticking out. Next slide. So there's the arm. See it sticking out? That's why it's called a vary arm. That was to make very small changes in frequency. So you use the calibration chart on top. And when you put the arm, you could do it any way you wanted, but nominally you put the arm at the corner of the box, and then the calibrations on the chart were pretty good, actually. And so you set to about the frequency you wanted, and then you use the vary arm to put yourself right on the frequency where you wanted to be. I should say that my unit was given to me by Jim Hanlon, W8KG IoT Harris, New Mexico, who has way too many boat anchors. He has probably about 30 transmitters and receivers each, 15 or 20 of which work at any given time. So there's the rectifier tube and the power amplifier tube. The oscillator tube is in the box. You'll see that later. The little box with the switch is the output coil, and the switch shorts down half the coil to put, well, not half, but changes you from 80 meter output to running the amplifier as a doubler and putting you out on 40 meters. Next. Okay, here's the top off the box. Notice the vary arm on the left and the little tuning capacitor inside, which only has one rotor plate. That's the way we got the band spread, you might say, the slow tuning to enable you to set the frequency precisely. And behind the front, in the front behind the knob, you can see another capacitor with many plates, and that's the main tuning. You can also see the top of the coil and the top of the tube. The top of the tube is in these little ones like this, the grid, as opposed to the plate, which some of us are used to in transmitters. That enabled you to put the grid circuit well away from everything else to reduce the tendency to oscillate. The vary arm being so relatively long, it facilitates making small changes in frequency because a change at the end of that long arm doesn't amount to much in the middle, if that makes sense to you. It's sort of a lever arm that gives you some increased motion per unit of frequency. Next. Here's underneath. Very neat wiring, components precisely placed, quality components. The blue thing on the right is a filter capacitor, which doesn't actually replace any of the originals, but one of the originals was kind of dried out and not filtering as well as it might, so I put one across it. Nominally, you would replace the two yellow ones and the old brown one. But since my time is limited and they were functional, I left them. On the back, you could see a fuse holder. If you ever wire a fuse holder, you want to put the hot lead from your power cord into the innermost terminal of the fuse holder, the tubular thing in the upper right, just by the cords. Because if you put it on the other terminal, the fuse is hot when you plug it in and contact that center terminal. We can go into that more if anybody builds anything with a fuse in it. Next. So what did I do? The original tubes only added up to 56 volts. So how do you run that from a 120 volt line? You put a 350 ohm dropping resistor in series, because the filament current is 300 mils, and you can use Ohm's law and figure that out for yourself. But the resistor dissipated 30 watts. Well, that was done originally in the power cord. It was a kind of asbestos core wound with a fine nichrome wire. And that cord was affectionately called a curtain burner, because in the old days, if something went wrong in the radio, it could put line voltage across that resistor and pretty quickly make smoke. I don't know if any curtains actually burned, but I kind of think they did. So what did I do? It occurred to me that there were other tubes than the ones used that had the same basic function. So I found a 50Z6 rectifier, a 50L6 amplifier, and a 12K7 oscillator. And if you add those up, you get remarkably close to 120 volt filament voltage. And not only that, since they're higher voltage, they draw less current for the same power. So I was able to run them right off the line, and it worked. I was so excited that I hooked it to my antenna, and I called CQ, and pretty soon I worked Illinois. I think he was the first. And then I worked New York, New Hampshire, and South Carolina. At least two of those came back to my CQs on 2 watts, 80 meter CW. After a little warm up, you know, a lot of oscillators, when you LC oscillators, coil capacitor oscillators, have a little drift as they come up to temperature of the tube and the components. And this one drifts for a few minutes, but not very long. And after that, it is very stable and perfectly usable on any band for CW, and I'm sure it would be for sideband. So there you go. I have subsequently hooked it to Banks's old transmitter. If you read the DFMA link last time, you will see an article about Banks and the transmitter he built in 1957. And this thing drives it. And that combination hasn't been on the air, but it will be next time we have an old equipment contest, which I think is in February. And that is the end of the story of the Variarm. Over. Oh, sorry. Go back. I'm sorry. Yeah, I forgot this one. The unit was built by James Millen Company, but as I said before, it's designed by Henry Rice. Millen marketed several things that had been designed by other people. I guess he paid them, I don't know. But Millen himself was a perfectionist and meticulous mechanical engineer who designed absolutely fabulous gear trains, insulators, terminal strips, binding posts, all the things that most people don't use anymore. He also designed the HRO receiver, thousands of which have been built, and I still have 3. They were one of the principal code intercept receivers used in World War II in Europe. So a famous guy, he worked at National Radio when he designed the HRO, broke away and formed his own company, James Millen, and made components of all sorts. Some of you have seen the Millen grid dip oscillator. He had small transmitters and amplifiers and VHF equipment, including receive preamplifiers. quite a guy. His home station is in the Antique Wireless Museum in Bloomfield, New York. And you can talk to it at certain times of the year when they have it on the air. And if you come to Land of Magic, you can see a Millen HF exciter, a Millen VHF exciter, the grid dip meter, and I think that's all that are there now. Okay, sorry. Now I'm through.
All right, Wilson, thank you very much.
I can definitely attest to the fact that Millen VFO works, because I have a couple old pieces of radio equipment. And when we had the last CX event, which means it's for old equipment, I was calling CQ and this guy W4BOH called me. I don't know which transmitter receiver I was using of my stuff, but he called me. And part of the exchange is they tell you what equipment they're using and you tell them what equipment you're using. And Wilson absolutely said that he was using this, and I think he was using his Heathkit SB300 receiver. So I got to hear it on the air and it sounds really good. So way to go, Wilson. Okay, next up, we're going to stay on Zoom. And yep, okay, we're going to go over to Roger and we're going to hear about a POTA portable antenna. And we'll let him introduce the topic and tell you all about it, and got some really good pictures here. So Roger, over to you.
Okay, thank you very much. As you all know, probably better than I do, POTA has become a popular activity among ham radio operators. Next slide, please. POTA consists of self-appointed people, some of whom are called activators, who decide to go to a state or national park, set up a portable station there, and then register that at the moment on the parksontheair.com website that shows all the stations that are active at any particular moment. So checking a few minutes ago, there are about 25 stations active in the United States right now. The stations in the parks are contacted by people mostly at home who are called hunters in the vernacular, and they just try to call the stations that are in the park. And the person in the park keeps the log and sends it in after everything is all over. This is an activity, not a contest, but it's fun and people enjoy doing it. Next slide. So to do a POTA activation, you basically need an energy source, generally a battery, a radio of some kind that you can get out to the park, and you need an antenna. The antenna is usually the hardest part. This is an example of a POTA antenna that has worked really well for me. So here it is as a composite picture. The antenna part is at the top, the mast is in the middle, just partially extended, and the base is at the bottom. The mast and base together about 31 feet high when it's extended. So I'll take you through the parts very quickly. Next slide. Next slide. Yes. Okay. So the antenna is simply 31 feet of number 26 wire. Number 26 wire is chosen as just because it's very light. And so you can string it up there. Nobody can see it, so you don't annoy other people in the park. And it doesn't weigh very much, which is good because the mast won't hold very much. Next slide. So the mast is a common commercial mast. Well, I don't know how common it is. They're erratically in stock. Carbon fiber, 30 inches long when it's all closed up together, about 30 feet long when it's expanded out. Now I say about 30 feet because the last top sections are so small that often people break them off and don't use them. So about 30 feet. Next slide. Now the magic in this antenna is the base. After trying, it seemed like every possible base in the whole wide world, I finally stumbled on using the base of the Wonder Shade antenna, the Wonder Shade umbrella, which you can buy from Amazon, among other places. It comes in two pieces, and the base is separate from the umbrella in the box as you get it. Next slide, please. Now, the great thing about this base and what makes it work so well is that it's there to hold the umbrella, which means it has a big base and yet it is not very tall. And so that is perfect. Next slide. For sliding the mast into the base, which is the problem with most other tripod type devices, is how do you get the mast in the base? And here you just slide it in. It turns out it is exactly the right size. You slide it in, it has that wonderful clasp. You just slide it in about 6 inches or so, push the clasp down, and there you got it. Next slide. If you put it all together and then get it ready to go to a park, there it is lying on the ground. It's about 5 feet long. Generally will go easily in a truck. Mostly it'll go in cars. You fit it in there carefully. So it's not heavy at all. You can carry it around with one hand. All the material is very lightweight, ready to go. Next slide. And here it is, expanded out just to make a picture. I did it at the Okanichi Park. You can see the base near the picnic table, the mast going up into the trees. As soon as it was extended, I began making contacts. Just works great. So POTO is a really fun activity. I know many of you do it already. If you haven't done it, I think that you will enjoy it. And whether you use this kind of antenna or any other, go out and have a good time. As they say, be active. Next slide. Thank you for watching. That's it for me.
Roger, thank you very much. In fact, we were having some POTA conversations in here tonight. So I know there's some definite interest in the room, and a very, very good job. Well done with the antenna. Okay, next up, we have somebody that's going to talk to us about streaming. So Randy, yep.
Before I get started, I just think Bruce and Laurie just need a big hand. They just worked. I'd love to get us going here. So I'm Randy Adams, a new member since June, and enjoying retiring and getting back into hemming now. And I started doing this mainly so people that I talked with could hear themselves, could hear their audio, and so really that was really my purpose for doing all this. My email's up there. We'll fly through this fairly quickly. The presentation actually is in the file section on the IO groups, so you can download that, and all the links will be in there for you. So here's what it'll look like. So anyway, that's a little bit of what it'll be. This is just a summary of what we'll be going through. So first thing you need to do is set up a YouTube account. Easy to do that. And even if you don't have a Google account, you can set that up with any email account. Then you create a YouTube channel. 2 ways to do that. One is just using your email. Another is actually the business or the brand name. You have a lot more options. It's a little bit more complex, but it's really not hard to do either of these things. And then actually you can go live. At that point, you could just use your cams and a mic and stop right there, and real easy. There's a good example of that on that second YouTube. Somebody that has done that real well, actually. But we're going to be a little bit more complex about it. Get a free software called OBS. You download and install that, and then you'll set up your OBS. And actually, as you're doing that, this actually will be blank, but this is OBS right here. You see your settings right down there. You'll click on your settings, get that going. And actually, as you do that, you'll see the menu over on the left here. You have general and stream. So we'll go back here. So general, the only thing I really change is checking for updates. I'm a control freak. So, and then streaming, you'll pick your YouTube, primary YouTube ingest server for that. And then we will look at output audio and video. You see that there. And output, you just need to set your recording path if you're going to record. Audio, it's really best. I don't know if your radio is able to, if you're able to do a USB and get the audio from the radio, that's really the best way to do it. If you can't, then you can use your mic for that. Video, no reason to touch that at all. Next, as this is what it'll look like, OBS initially. You go up here to the top and hit your scene collection, and you'll set a new one. You can name that whatever, and then you'll go down here and here's your scenes and here's your sources. So you'll set each of those, you'll give them new names and whatever, and then you'll add your sources. Now you can see what I've done here. Whoops. So here's my scenes here, 890S. I have a Kenwood 890S, and I've got, let me read that there. I've got my cam, and then my banner, and then my display. Those are my sources there. And now for audio, what I've done, you go into your source, and you'll click the custom source here, and use the codec from the for your radio. And you'll get your source in there then. So that's really pretty easy to do that too. The banner is very easy to do. You can use Canva, which is free. Get your banner going, and you're all set then. Then you'll go live. When you go live, you hit your settings down here, and you'll go to stream right here. And what I use the little use the stream key. It says advanced there, but it's really easy to do that. You'll click on that, and then it'll pop your stream key there. You'll get stream key. And when that happens, you actually go back to YouTube, and you can edit and get your title going. You go back to OBS and click start streaming right here, and you're on the air, up and running. And it really is nice because you can let other people hear their audio. And actually on my QRZ site, I have a link that I'll let them know, and they can go click on that and hear themselves recording. So all done. Any questions? I know I zoomed through that pretty quickly for time, but again, the presentation is all up on the files on the IO group. And if you have any questions, my email's there. I'd be glad to help you out.
So I actually have a question. So I wanted to wait till I had the mic back so the people on Zoom could hear. So do you typically record every QSO that you have? Is it automatic like that? Or do you just say to somebody, hey, I'm going to record this now. Do you want to hear your audio? How frequently do you use this?
It depends. Depends on the time that I have. If I'm recording, then I always let people know that. Now, if somebody's wanting their audio checked, I'll say, hold on for a second, and we'll go and get it going, and we can check it like that. But I don't, and every time I'm on the radio, I won't be doing this necessarily.
Okay, so that means if any of you have a QSO with Randy, he's not recording you. Now, are all of these stored on, do they stay on YouTube after? Okay, so you've got a channel and they all stay on the channel. Okay, got it. Okay, thank you very much. That is the last presentation tonight. So I would like a big round of applause for everybody. I'd really like to thank the people that came forward and put all of their presentations together and then came up here and did them. One of the things we would really like to do this coming year, now that we're all elected, now we can talk about what we want to do. We would really like to get more participation from the folks in the club. Every meeting you see me up here talking about something. This was great for me to sit over there and watch somebody else talk about something much more interesting than anything I'm going to say. Right, Bill? See, Bill agrees with that. But yeah, you're right. Exactly. But, you know, hopefully throughout the year, we'll have some more group participation, club member participation as we figure out exactly what the agendas will be. Speaking of agendas and programs, next meeting, We're going to have Mike Thorne here. Mike is an OCRA member, but he's also from Chatham County and very active with the Chatham Emergency Operations Center. We talked last year about trying to rebuild our relationship with the Orange County Emergency Operations Center. We've got an individual sitting right here, Chris, that happens to be really good friends with some of the folks there. And Lori and I met them also when we were there, as did Bob. And Ken is on the phone, and Aurora Zoom. Aurora's on the Zoom. So we met some of them. But so hopefully we can start to rebuild our relationship with them. Mike's program next month is going to be focused at what services does Chatham look for the amateur radio operators to provide to them, and how do they do it? So it's a two-way street. How, if they want something, how do they get trained? How do they get ready? What kind of equipment? So Mike is going to give us a presentation on the relationship they have with the Chatham EOC, how they built it, and what services that they provide. So it should be really interesting. Then we'll get into some more stuff, more technical stuff as we start to move through the year. Some WinLink stuff and Vara software and things like that. So we'll get into that as we move through the year. Okay,
Hey, Bruce.
let's,